back to Paul and his churches. This is our third week, and we would like to discuss major phases in Paul's development of Paul's theology. So in this week's lecture, what we would like to discuss is what are the major changes in Paul's theology, especially in terms of the change because of his conversion. So probably from next week on, we will analyze each topic or major letter of Paul. But before that, we'd like to discuss Paul more in general in this way. So I hope you guys printed out my lecture note. You know that I posted my lecture note to our course website, so you can download the whole lecture, and then not much, right? So what according to the schedule of our syllabus, I expect you to read the portion of the lecture in advance before you come here to this lecture. So let me start with the first page. If analyzed according to their chronological sequence, Paul's letters evidence major phases of his theological development. Traces of development include direct references by Paul himself to views held in the past, but not overcome, citations of pre-Pauline traditions taken over by him, or shifts in his thinking observable by critical investigation. So, chronological sequence. Probably the first letter that he wrote will be First Thessalonian, and then the last letter might be Romans. So in between you have First and Second Corinthians and Galatians here, and Philippians, and many others. So the first letter is First Thessalonian, Romans is the last one. So what we find is that, let me see. Hello. All right. Hello. Okay. Okay, I cannot find. Oh no. Okay, all right. What we find in Paul's letters is that his theology develops chronologically, right? When he was like 40 or mid 40 at that time, and he might be like late 50s or early 60s. Paul here may be slightly different from Paul here, Paul there. So what we can notice is that Paul's theology developed continuously. His theology didn't stay here, and his theology here is the same that is found in there, right? His theology developed. So if we analyze chronologically according to the time, we can notice that there are some developments, phases of development of his theology. Traces of development include direct references by Paul himself to views held in the past. So there are some places where Paul discusses what he used to believe before his conversion, and citation of pre-Pauline traditions. As you already know, Jesus died in 30, and Paul converted probably 32 and 33 CE. So in this time period, Christology developed. and many disciples developed theology. So when Paul converted at this time, and already theology has developed a lot. So Paul has to learn from other disciples like Peter, James, and other 12 disciples, or many other Hellenists in Antioch church. Paul has to learn from them about the theology that has developed in between time period. So Paul is kind of, citing pre-Pauline tradition. And then number 3, shifts in his thinking observable by critical investigation. Paul does not necessarily accept everything from Pauline tradition exactly the same that is found in pre-Pauline tradition. Paul is a critical thinker, so he will change, modify, or develop. So we can discern these 3 elements. So the first thing that we want to discuss is pre-Christian Pharisaism that Paul used to believe in the past. Okay. Now this way. Although reliable sources here are extremely scarce, some conclusions can be drawn from Paul's own references to his pre-Christian past and theology he affirmed at that time. So for that evidence, we have Galatians 1:13-14, and 1 Corinthians 15:9, and 2 Corinthians 11:12, and Philippians 3:5-6. So what are the most important passages is this one, Galatians and Philippians. Probably this one will be the most important. This one will be the most important. Oops. This one will be the most important, and this is the second most important. Oh, not easy. According to his own witness, Paul was an Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin, according to Philippians 3:5. What is the Israelite? What does the Israelite mean? That means that Paul is a member of the people of God. Israel means people of God, and he is from the tribe of Benjamin. What's the significance of he is from the tribe of Benjamin? Out of Jacob's 12 sons, Benjamin is the one who was born in the promised land, and at the same time, the first king of Israel, Saul, is from this tribe. And after the King Solomon, 10 tribes revolted against the tribe of Judah, the Davidic kingdom. However, Benjamite, the tribe of Benjamin, they remained loyal to the tribe of Judah. So a certain a certain Judah was consisted of 2 tribes, tribe of Judah and tribe of Benjamin. So this tribe is very loyal. And Hebrew from Hebrews. So what's the significance of the term Hebrew? Hebrew means that Paul is a Jew, but he was born in diaspora outside of Palestine, and Hebrew from Hebrews. So Hebrew means that although he was born in diaspora world, he lived as a sincere, strict Jew according to the Jewish regulation. So the term Hebrew from Hebrews means that he was very seriously, he lived very seriously a Jewish way of life, although he was born in diaspora. And he was circumcised on the eighth day of his life. Circumcision is the symbol of you are being the descendant of Abraham. So obviously, Paul was very proud of his own being a Jew and a Pharisee. He was a member of the Pharisaic sect. There were many small groups in Judaism in Paul's time, Pharisees, Sadducees, and Sadduceans. But Pharisees are the specialists in the law. So he was trained to be a legal scholar in the law, and devoted to upholding the traditions of forefathers. Traditions of forefathers means the Pharisaic tradition. Like the Jews in Pharisaic tradition, they interpreted the law in many different ways, and Paul was a specialist in interpreting, analyzing, or understanding or applying these traditions of the forefathers. If this is assumed, he must have been a well-versed member to the Pharisaic party. The affirmation that he was a son of a Pharisee, at Acts 23:6, at the least assures us that his Pharisaism was genuine, that he was authorized to persecute Christians means that his aims received official recognition. But unfortunately, since he was very jealous for the traditions of the forefathers as a Pharisee, unfortunately, he was forced to persecute the Christians. As you already know, he received a letter from the high priest in Jerusalem, and he was heading to the city Damascus to persecute the church there. And why was Paul trying to persecute the Christians in Damascus? Because they claimed that through the Messiah, Jesus, the crucified one, Gentiles can become the members of God, people of God, without observing the law. And that message was very disturbing to Paul. Okay, second part. Paul's testimony leaves no doubt that his primary concern as a Pharisee was Torah. The Pharisees, they were specialists in the legal issues relating to Torah and righteousness. So righteousness, what is the righteousness? Righteousness is the righteous status before God in terms of Torah. In order for you to become righteous, you have to abide by all the regulations of the Torah. So that was Paul's primary concern as a Pharisee before his conversion. A conscientious Jew, with respect to the Torah, Paul stood blameless. He said that he was blameless with respect to the issues of the Torah. Paul describes in Galatians 5:3 what he thought about the law, not without polemic poignancy. So in Galatians 1, Paul says in Galatians 5:3, I testify again to every man who has become circumcised that, this is a typo, that he is obliged. Let me see. Here. Okay. So he is obliged to do the whole law. So issue of circumcision and whole law. The concept of the whole law is presupposed also in Galatians 3:10, where everything that is written in the book of the law defines quantitatively what is meant by the whole law. So everything that is written in the book of the law means 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, and Leviticus. So everything that is written in the book of the law, the 5 books by Moses, you have to abide by. You have to keep the whole law written in this in the 5 books of Pentateuch written by Paul. Anything less amounts to being under the curse. So that was Paul's previous attitude regarding the law. If Paul claims to have been blameless in terms of the Torah, he went further in his zeal by persecuting the Jewish Christians of Damascus, whom he, in agreement with the authorities in Jerusalem, regarded as apostates. So, one of the main reasons for this persecution is that these Jewish Christians did not subject Gentile proselytes to Torah and circumcision. So they did not subject Gentile proselytes to Torah and circumcision, discontinuing discontinuing the traditions of the forefathers, which Paul so zealously enforced. So Paul claims that he was blameless in terms of the Torah. That means that he was very serious about the regulations of the law, and he was strictly abiding by its regulation. However, Paul heard about the Christians in Damascus that they were proclaiming the Gospels, and they don't ask Gentile proselytes to keep the Torah and circumcision, thereby destroying the traditions of forefathers. Therefore, Paul, considered those Christians in Damascus apostates, hypocrites, or heretics. So Paul was heading to Damascus to destroy their movement, to persecute the Christians. So what happens next? So what happens next is, What happens next? Okay, next page. Right. So I'm kind of using modern technology to offer you an online lecturing. So I'm kind of learning. So the first thing that we discussed was Paul's pre-conversion life in Judaism as a Pharisee. Now, the second topic that we'd like to discuss is Paul's conversion to Jesus Christ. Paul's conversion to, according to Paul's own testimony in Galatians 1, 11 to 12 and 15 to 16, and 1 Corinthians 9, 1 and 15, 8, and Philippians 3, 5 to 6. I said this is very important, and this is very important. The greatest change in Paul's thinking was brought about as a consequence of his vision of Christ on the road to Damascus. Appearing to him in this vision, Christ commissioned him to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. Paul at once dedicated himself to this task. What were the consequences of this event for Paul's theology? Four things immediately present themselves. As you may know, according to Acts chapter 9, Paul was heading to Damascus to persecute the Christians. But on his way to Damascus, he encounters the risen Jesus in glory, and he fell off the horse. And Paul was blind for 3 days, and finally on the third day, one of the disciples of Jesus, named Ananias, comes to him and lays hands upon Paul. So Paul restores his sight, and somehow Paul changes his direction of life. But the most important element of that event was that the reason Jesus had a conversation with Paul. And the reason Jesus said to Paul, Paul, why are you persecuting me? Paul said, when did I persecute you? Jesus said, you are persecuting my people, my church. And Jesus says, I called you to proclaim the gospel, not among the Jews, but among the Gentiles. So, in this event, we have Paul's conversion. Paul's conversion. And at the same time, he experiences commissioning from Jesus Christ to proclaim the gospel to the Gentiles. So these two elements, conversion to Jesus Christ and his commissioning to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, these two elements becomes the most important aspects of Paul's life and theology. Okay. Now, Paul at once dedicated himself to this task. What were the consequences of this event, the Damascus event, for Paul's theology? Four things immediately present themselves. Four things. So let's discuss one at a time. Number one, Paul's commitment to Pharisaism came to an abrupt end as he switched from Pharisaic to Christian Judaism. So, before his encountering with the risen Jesus, he was very serious about Pharisaic Judaism, but now he leaves Pharisaism and he comes to Christian Judaism, the church in Antioch. And now let me move myself a little bit high. And now, second thing, Paul's assignment to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. First, meant that he joined the missionary, this is typo, the missionary enterprise. This is typo. Let me see whether I can change. Okay, I can change. So, he joined the missionary enterprises of the Damascus church. So, here comes a very ironic situation. Paul was heading to Damascus to destroy the church, but after his encounter with the risen Jesus, he now joins the Damascus church and he engages himself in the missionary enterprise in proclaiming the gospel to the Gentiles. However, from this Damascus church, Paul must also have received his first instruction in Christian theology. Here in the Damascus church, Paul learned from the disciples, those who became Christians before Paul. Those disciples taught Paul about the basic elements of Christian theology. So the question that we raise is, what kind of instruction and tradition did Paul receive from them? We have to critically investigate them. Now, what did the Christians of Damascus have in mind when they converted non-Jews? How did they, so the Christian of Damascus, how did they as Jews justify it? Clearly, here's a typo again. Sorry about that. Clearly, this one, yeah, right. Clearly, the reason for Paul's persecuting them was that they failed to subject the new converts to circumcision. Yeah, they didn't subject the new convert to circumcision and Torah, which were the major elements of Paul's pre-conversion theology. So, what was their theological reason for making converts outside the Torah covenant? So this is very important. What did the Jewish Christian church in Jerusalem thought about this? Did they approve or disapprove? Or were they already divided over the question, as they obviously were later on? So this is a very important question. What was their theological reason for making converts outside of the Torah covenant? This is a single most important question. So I'm going to make it like this. So what was their theological reason for making converts outside the Torah covenant? Formally, for you to become people of God, you have to be members of Abraham. You have to be inside the Torah. However, those Christians in Damascus church, they didn't ask the Gentile converts to abide by the Torah. So the question is why? And we have to analyze that question in a minute. Okay, let's have a short break here and we will resume our lecture on Paul again. Thank you very much. I'll see you in a